Welcome to the Lore Archive.
Chapter 2, The Woman in White. Zakierd did not sleep. He tried. He turned off the computer first, then the television, then the radio, then his phone. One by one he silenced every device in the room, until there was nothing left but rain against the window, and the sound of his own breathing. Still he did not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes he saw the older man on the television screen. Not the blood, not the static, not even the impossible fact that the man had his face. It was the eyes that stayed with him. Older Zakierd's eyes had not looked frightened. They had looked tired. There was something worse than fear in them, something worn down by too many failures, too many lives lost, too many warnings sent too late. You are not the first me. You are the last one who still belongs here. Zakierd sat on the edge of his bed until morning came, holding the 13th notebook against his chest, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. At some point the rain stopped. At some point the sky outside his window turned gray. At some point the first buses began to move along the road below, carrying people into another ordinary Singapore morning. The world had not ended. That bothered him more than it should have. If reality had cracked open in his bedroom, surely there should have been some sign of it. Some siren in the distance, some government announcement, some neighbor shouting, some proof that the impossible had not happened only to him. But the auntie downstairs still opened her shop. The lift still stopped on every floor. A child still cried because he did not want to go to school. Someone laughed loudly near the void deck. Life continued with almost insulting confidence. Zakierd changed into dry clothes, though he could not remember when he had become damp with sweat. He put on his black hoodie gray shirt jeans and worn sneakers. Then he stood in front of the mirror. He looked normal. That was the most disturbing part. His hair was messy. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. There was a faint trembling in his hands, but otherwise he looked like himself. A 21-year-old man who had stayed up too late. Nothing more. He opened the 13th notebook again. The 17th of August, 2008. I remember. The words had not vanished. He turned the page. Blank. He turned another. Blank. There was no new message, no hidden map, no instructions from the future, just paper. For a moment, he almost laughed. What am I supposed to do with this? He whispered. The notebook did not answer. His mother called from outside the room, asking if he was awake. Her voice was ordinary, gentle, unaware. Zakierd quickly closed the notebook. He waited until her footsteps moved away. Then he slipped the notebook into his backpack. At the last second, he hesitated. The warning had said not to answer any message from himself. It had said not to follow the woman in white. It had not said to stay home. That thought was not comforting. It felt like a loophole. By the time Zakierd left the flat, the sky had darkened again. Singapore weather had a way of threatening rain even after it had already rained. The air was wet and heavy. The pavement still reflected the morning lights. He told himself he was going out because he needed air. That was true. He told himself he wanted to see whether the world felt normal outside. That was also true. He did not tell himself the third reason. He wanted to know if she existed, the woman in white. The phrase had sat in his mind all night like a stone. Do not follow the woman in white. Not, do not trust her. Not, do not speak to her. Follow. As if the future already knew she would appear, as if the only uncertain thing was whether Zakierd would obey. He walked without direction at first, moving through familiar paths with unfamiliar caution. Every reflection caught his attention. Every passing stranger seemed briefly suspicious. A man reading a newspaper near the void deck, a woman adjusting her umbrella, a student with earphones, a delivery rider stopping too long at the traffic light. Normal people, normal morning. Normal world. Zakierd tried to breathe slowly. He had trained himself to do that years ago during wushu. Inhale, settle the weight, watch the center line. Do not look at the hands. Look at the body. A person's body told the truth before their mouth did. His wushu instructor had said that during training when Zakierd was 14, after Zakierd had been kicked in the ribs because he kept watching his opponent's feet. Too many details confuse you, the instructor had told him. Find the center. The center moves first. At the time, Zakierd thought the lesson was about fighting. Years later, he realized it was about fear. Fear also had a center. Find it, and it became smaller. He reached the bus stop near the main road just as the first drops of rain began to fall again. The bus shelter was crowded. Office workers, students, an old uncle with plastic bags, a mother holding a child's hand. Everyone pressed inward as the rain strengthened. Zakierd stood near the edge of the shelter, one hand on the strap of his backpack. Then the air changed. Not the weather, the air. Sound thinned. The rain became softer, though he could still see it falling hard. The people around him did not freeze, but their movements slowed in a way that made Zakierd's skin crawl. A woman blinked too slowly. A bus door opened with a long metallic sigh. A boy's laughter stretched like audio played at the wrong speed. Zakierd knew that feeling. He had felt it on the 1st of January 2000. His fingers tightened around the backpack strap. Across the road, under a line of dripping trees, stood a woman in white. She was facing him. She wore a long white coat that should have been soaked through. But the rain did not seem to touch her properly. It moved around her, breaking against some invisible outline. Her black hair fell straight past her shoulders. Her posture was calm, almost gentle, too calm. The world around her flickered, not like a broken screen, like a memory failing to decide what it wanted to be. A passing car cut across Zakierd's view. For half a second, she disappeared. When the car passed, she was at the bus stop, standing less than 3 meters away. Nobody reacted. The old uncle kept looking down the road. The mother adjusted her child's raincoat. The students remained absorbed in their phones. Only Zakierd stepped back. The woman looked at him with eyes that were almost human. "Zakierd," she said. His name sounded wrong in her mouth. Not mispronounced, too familiar. He turned to leave. "If you run now," she said, "they will reach you first." Zakierd stopped. His entire body wanted to move, but training held him still for one more second. Find the center. The woman's face was calm. Her shoulders relaxed, her hands visible. No weapon, no sudden movement. But the center was not her body. It was the space around her. The rain bent there. The light bent there. The world did not quite accept her. Zakierd took one step back. "Who are you?" "My name is Leora Shen." The name meant nothing to him. That made it worse. "I was sent to protect you." Zakierd almost laughed. The sound caught in his throat. "From who?" Leora's eyes shifted past him. Zakierd followed her gaze. 3 men had entered the far end of the bus shelter. They wore ordinary clothes, dark jackets, wet shoes, backpacks, people he might not have noticed on any other day. But something was wrong with them. They moved with the same rhythm, not coordinated like trained soldiers, synchronized like copied footage. One looked directly at Zakierd, then another, then the third. All 3 reached into their jackets at the same time. Zakierd did not wait to see what they were reaching for. He ran. The bus shelter exploded into confused motion behind him. Someone shouted. A bag hit the ground. The rain swallowed half the sounds. Zakierd cut through the gap between 2 commuters, slipped on the wet pavement, recovered, and sprinted toward the covered walkway beside the flats. "Zakierd," Leora called. He did not turn. The warning from the future burned in his mind. Do not follow the woman in white. So he did the only thing that made sense. He followed no one. Behind him the footsteps began, fast, precise, too close. Zakierd ran harder. He was not a fast runner by habit, but fear gave him speed, and wushu gave him balance. He kept low, shoulders forward, notebook clutched inside his backpack. Rain struck his face. His sneakers slapped against the wet concrete. The covered walkway stretched ahead, silver with water and morning light. He turned left. A man stepped out from behind a pillar. Zakierd almost crashed into him. The man reached for his backpack. Zakierd reacted before thinking. His left hand swept the man's wrist outward. His right palm struck the man's chest, not hard enough to injure, just enough to create space. The movement was ugly, desperate, nothing like the clean forms he had practiced in school halls years ago, but it worked. The man stumbled. Zakierd slipped past him. Another hand grabbed his hood from behind. The fabric pulled tight against his throat. For a second, he could not breathe. He dropped his weight, twisted, and drove his elbow backward. The grip loosened. He tore free and ran again, not fighting to win, fighting to leave. That was the first rule he had learned without realizing it. A fight was not always about defeating someone. Sometimes survival was just creating 1 second of space. He heard one of the men speak behind him. Anchor confirmed. Another voice answered. Secure the notebook. Zakieرد's blood went cold. They knew about the notebook. Of course they did. Everyone impossible seemed to know more about his life than he did. He turned again, moving toward the main road. Traffic hissed past in sheets of rain, across the junction through the gray morning. He saw the sign of a neighborhood police post. A police station. The thought struck him with desperate simplicity. People could lie. Cameras could record. Officers could help. Rules still existed there. They had to. Zakierd ran toward it. The men followed. At the final crossing, the pedestrian light turned red. He did not stop. A taxi braked hard. The horn screamed. Someone shouted at him in Hokkien. Zakierd reached the other side, lungs burning, legs shaking, one cheek stinging where he must have scraped it against something. The notebook pressed against his ribs through the backpack, like a second heartbeat. The glass doors of the police post slid open. Cool air hit his face. White fluorescent lights. A counter. An officer looking up in surprise. Zakierd stumbled inside and turned back immediately. The street behind him was empty. No men, no footsteps, no Leora, only rain, traffic, and ordinary people walking through an ordinary morning. For a moment, Zakierd could not move. Then pain returned to him. His cheek burned, his knuckles throbbed, his shoulder ached where someone had grabbed his bag. He looked down at his hands. Red marks, torn skin, proof. He pulled the notebook from his backpack. Still there, wet at the edges, real. The officer stood slowly. "Young man," he said. "Are you hurt?" Zakierd looked from the notebook to the empty street. The world had not ended. The world had done something worse. It had continued pretending. "Yes," Zakierd said, though he was no longer sure which question he was answering. He stepped toward the counter. "I need to make a report."
Like, subscribe, and open the next archive.